Think the golden age of Hollywood was all glitz and glamour? That's the fantasy they sold you, projected onto silver screens across America. But what about the reality? The raw truth that festered just beyond the Klieg lights, in the shadows of the sound stages. It was a world of ambition, rivalry, and desperation, where the pressure to be perfect created monsters. Behind the scenes, some of its brightest stars, women who embodied elegance, had mouths that could make a sailor blush. So are you ready to see these icons not as saints, but as the complex, sometimes crude, and utterly captivating women they truly were? Let's pull back the velvet curtain on the most notoriously vulgar actresses of classic Hollywood. This is the Hollywood they didn't want you to see. When you speak of Hollywood royalty, the name Bette Davis is uttered with reverence. Those eyes, that voice, an actress of unparalleled power. Off-camera, Bette was a tempest with a famously sharp tongue. She didn't just walk onto a set, she conquered it. Her feud with Joan Crawford is legendary, but on the set of, her verbal daggers were at their sharpest. Crew members recall Bette punctuating her frustrations with a litany of curses. For Bette, swearing was power, a tool to assert dominance in a man's world. She saw Hollywood's polite evasions for what they were, a cage. Her profanity was the key. She once said, "Hollywood wanted me to be a vixen, so I played the part." Co-stars learned to develop a thick skin or stay out of her way. Bette respected talent, but had no patience for weakness or unprofessionalism. Miss a line or a mark, and you'd get a verbal dressing down. Years later, Bette was unapologetic about her reputation. She wore her sharp tongue like a badge of honor. "If being a bitch was the price of getting the work done right, then I was proud to be the biggest bitch in Hollywood," she'd say. The legend of Bette Davis is twofold. The immortal actress on screen, and the woman behind the image, letting loose a string of profanities. One could not exist without the other. The fire that fueled her performances was the same fire that fueled her legendary, unapologetic vulgarity. She was, in every sense, a dame. And in Hollywood, that meant being tough enough to curse with the best of them. Bette Davis didn't just survive Hollywood. She bent it to her will, one expletive at a time. If Bette Davis was a storm, Joan Crawford was a glacier. Cold, immense, and crushing. On screen she was the epitome of glamour, but beneath the veneer was a will of iron and a vocabulary to match. Joan didn't just swear, she swore with purpose, using profanity to maintain the immaculate world she demanded. Maids and assistants lived in fear of her inspections. A single speck of dust could trigger a tirade. Her favorite words were short, sharp, and designed to wound. On set, she was the consummate professional, but had no tolerance for slackers. While Bette's outbursts were explosive, Joan's were cold and cutting. The feud with Bette Davis brought out the worst in both, was a battlefield of psychological warfare and foul language. Crawford would complain about Bette's habits, all while muttering her own curses under her breath. But Joan's vulgarity was also a sign of her grit, a reminder of her tough, impoverished childhood as Lucille Lesueur. The polished accent and designer gowns were armor, but the rough language was her true self. She was particularly unfiltered with studio heads, marching into offices and making demands peppered with language that made moguls blush. Joan Crawford's legacy is as complex as her personality, a symbol of glamour, a ruthless professional, and a woman with a shockingly foul mouth. Her profanity was the steel beneath the silk. It was the sound of a woman who fought for everything she had, and dared anyone to take it away. Tallulah Bankhead didn't just use profanity, she made it an art form. With her deep husky voice and aristocratic drawl, every curse word sounded impossibly chic. Her parties were legendary, filled with scandalous stories and language so blue it became instant Hollywood lore. She delighted in shocking people, pushing the boundaries of polite society until they shattered. Tallulah was openly, brazenly herself in an era of suffocating conformity. Her sexuality was fluid, her appetites legendary, and her opinions delivered without a shred of filter. When the Hays Code tried to sanitize Hollywood, Tallulah was a walking, cursing affront to its existence. She famously quipped, "I'm as pure as the driven slush." Unlike her contemporaries, Tallulah's vulgarity was public part of her brand. On the set of Hitchcock's, co-stars were treated to daily masterclasses in creative cursing. She was a hurricane of charisma and crudity, the daughter of a powerful politician who broke every rule. Her vulgarity was a declaration of independence from her stuffy upbringing and Hollywood's rigid expectations. In the pantheon of profane goddesses, Tallulah sits on a throne all her own. She wasn't just vulgar, she was an artist of vulgarity. Is that a pistol in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? With one line, Mae West became a legend. dancing on the razor's edge of censorship. Her genius was being filthy without saying anything dirty, on screen at least. Off-screen, the real Mae West was even more direct and gloriously vulgar. She was a product of vaudeville and burlesque, fluent in their earthy, profane language. Studio executives who tried to tone down her scripts were met with a barrage of language that left them speechless. She saw censorship as a personal affront and defended her risque jokes with a sailor's vocabulary. Her private life was even more candid, her conversation peppered with four-letter words. Mae West's entire career was a rebellion. Arrested for her play, she learned controversy sold tickets. She took that lesson to Hollywood, driving censors mad with her strategic use of innuendo and outright obscenity. Her scripts were a game of cat and mouse. She'd write lines so obscene they'd be cut, just to keep the ones she really wanted. In the end, Mae West's vulgarity was her superpower, the engine of her comedy and the foundation of her fame. She proved you could be shocking, vulgar, and still be a lady who knew a hell of a lot of dirty jokes. When I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better. Marlene Dietrich was an enigma, cool, sophisticated, and wrapped in silk and smoke. But beneath the glamour was a core of steel, forged in Weimar Berlin and hardened by Hollywood. Dietrich had no time for Hollywood's fluff. She was famously, almost brutally honest. If she didn't like a script or a co-star, she'd say so, in the most undiplomatic terms imaginable. Her German accent could take on a harsh, cutting edge when she was displeased. That is absolute shit. Her profanity was multilingual. She could curse you out in German, French, or English, choosing the language that best suited the offense. This wasn't just for show, it was part of her identity as an outsider, an artist who refused to be fully assimilated. During Watu entertaining troops, her language became even earthier. She spoke their language, earning their adoration. Her relationships were conducted with the same blunt honesty, describing lovers with a frankness that shocked even Hollywood insiders. Directors like Josef von Sternberg knew they were dealing with a collaborator, not a puppet. Creative arguments often included a healthy dose of profanity. Marlene Dietrich's vulgarity was the byproduct of a fiercely intelligent, radically honest mind. It was the language of a woman who had seen the world and simply didn't have time for bullshit. Her glamour was for the camera. Her blunt, profane honesty was the real woman underneath. Ava Gardner, one of the most breathtaking women to grace the screen, was no delicate flower. A sharecropper's daughter from North Carolina, she never let anyone forget it. That southern charm could give way in an instant to a foul mouth as legendary as her beauty. Ava swore with the gusto of a farmer and didn't care who heard her. She hated Hollywood's artifice, calling herself a movie star, never an actress. Her profanity was rebellion, a way to stay connected to her roots and shield herself from phoniness. Her marriage to Frank Sinatra was a storm of passion and profanity, their fights filled with creative, vulgar insults. Interviews with Ava were a publicist's nightmare, candid, unfiltered, and often hilariously obscene. She famously said, "When I'm old and gray, I'm going to write a book and tell everything." And she did. She was grounded, earthy, uninterested in putting on airs. Friends like Hemingway loved her authenticity. She called a spade a goddamn shovel. On set, her patience for incompetence was non-existent. Her anger was a hot, southern flash flood. The glamour was what the studio sold, but the cussing, drinking, and living was the real woman. In a world of delicate beauties, Shelley Winters was a force of nature. A two-time Oscar winner, she was loud, brash, and had a mouth that could start a fight in an empty room. Shelley weaponized profanity, carving out space in a male-dominated Hollywood. On talk shows, she was a whirlwind of anecdotes and gossip, all delivered with a rich tapestry of swear words. She wasn't trying to be shocking. This was simply how she communicated. Shelley saw Hollywood as a battlefield and came prepared for combat. She fought for roles, equal pay, and respect. Her language was part of her armor. Her autobiography is a masterclass in scandalous, profane storytelling. No euphemisms, just plain, often crude language. On set, she was both prepared and volatile, her arguments with directors legendary. She clashed with Stanley Kubrick her booming voice and salty language echoing through the soundstage. Shelley was fiercely political, her curse-laden speeches at rallies a stark contrast to other stars' careful statements. Her profanity was the sound of her passion and her authenticity. Shelley Winters was a survivor, constantly reinventing herself over 50 years. Her brash personality and foul mouth were essential to her success. She was a broad in the best sense, tough, talented, and magnificently foul-mouthed to the end. So there you have it, the grit beneath the glamour, the curses behind the couture, Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Tallulah Bankhead, Mae West, Marlene Dietrich, Ava Gardner, Shelley Winters. These weren't just actresses, they were architects of their own legends, sometimes using rough materials. They swore, they fought, they scandalized, and refused to be silenced. Their vulgarity wasn't a flaw, it was a declaration of their fierce, untamable spirits. The golden age may be over, but the echoes of their defiant voices remain. Which Hollywood scandal shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories, because the truth is always more interesting than the fantasy.